started. Be sure and put your phones on vibrate. Oh, let me tell myself that too. Put your phones on vibrate, please. I'll call the meeting to order. We do have a quorum. We're going to have the prayer by Ara Rahman, a peace ambassador, and we're going to have the pledge by Travis Stribling. So if y'all will stand.
Assalamu alaikum. Peace be upon you. Thank you very much for inviting me to pray with you. Let us pray. Dear God, Almighty Supreme Being, the Creator of all, Allah, the omnipotent, omniscient, and omnipresent, infinitely compassionate and most merciful. Thank you, God, for the opportunity to gather here with my diverse sisters and brothers on this special morning to express our gratitude and to ask for your guidance. We are profoundly grateful for the countless blessings you have showered upon us. Through your gift of awareness, you have shown us that when people of all backgrounds and all walks of life work together for the benefit of all, true peace permeates our hearts. In the process, all barriers break down and we become one. What happens to one affects us all. Please help us to be curious, to be open to learning, and to understand one another more. Thank you, God, for the precious gift of love. You have sent each one of us in this world with a heart which is generously filled with your love. Time and again you have shown us that love can cure most of mankind's ailments. Being able to feel love from someone and express love to someone else is a huge blessing to both the provider and the receiver. Even as simple as a gentle touch or a smile can make a huge difference. Please help us to use this gift of love more often. Thank you, Allah, for the gift of diversity. Without diversity, life would be meaningless and lonely, and we would lose the opportunity to learn from each other. You have eloquently shown us that diversity is divine beauty among all of your creation. We are deeply grateful for the opportunity to live freely in a diverse community. Diversity helps to bring out the best in all of us. Thank you, God, for blessing us with diversity as our national strength and heritage. Through your examples, you also teach us that blessed are the peacemakers who are open-minded, all-inclusive, observant, flexible, and compassionate, for they help to build the peaceful world for all. We pray for the well-being and wisdom of our City Planning Commission members. We appreciate them for what they do for us. Please help them so that they will know the needs and aspirations of our citizens and strive to serve us accordingly. Please help us to use our natural resources wisely and strive together to make a peaceful and prosperous future for all. Oh Allah, please guide us to have a better understanding of each other, to have more tolerance, acceptance, and compassion for one another. Help us so that we may acquire abilities equal to our opportunities and lead us to use our abilities and talents to contribute for the betterment of our future and inspire us to leave behind far more than we will ever take. Please give us knowledge, wisdom, and courage to overcome our discord and grant us inner strength to seek friendship, peace, and harmony. O our Creator, our provider, our sustainer, we ask you for the best the day has to offer, opening, support, light, blessings, and guidance. We seek refuge in you from any harm in it and any harm that may come after it. Please forgive us for our mistakes and guide us to learn from them. May love and peace always surround each and everyone. May God bless the whole world. Amen.
All right, I forgot my glasses today, so this is going to be fun. First of all, we have the consent agenda. The commission may request for a consent agenda item to be moved to the regular agenda for presentation and public comment. Otherwise, the consent agenda will be considered in one vote. We're approving the modifications to the June 19th, 2017 Planning Commission minutes and the consideration of approving the July 17th Planning Commission regular minutes and the final plat of the Twin Oaks Edition, Section 27. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Mark made the motion. Joe seconded it. All in favor? Aye. All right. Moving on. The regular agenda, subdivision plats. The Planning Commission has final authority for approval. Appeals may be directed to the City Council. First, we have the 5th replat in the Sunset Mall Edition, Section 1.
All right, good morning, Commissioners. Christina Radia with the Planning Department for the record. Today I'm here to talk about the Sunset Mall Edition. This is going to be the 5th replat in Section Block 9A, as you can see highlighted here on the map. It is approximately 3.75 acres, and it fronts on West Loop 306. The zoning is CGCH, and it is in single-member District Number 6, Sunset Neighborhood. So here's what the proposed replat will look like. Currently, right now, it is one solid lot, Block A, so it's not a lot, actually. And then here it will be divided into 3 lots. So we'll have 3 individual lots. We are recommending approval of the replat subject to 6 conditions of approval. Those 6 are, number 1, that there are no delinquent taxes. Number 2, that they, on the actual plat, they illustrate the frontage road and its right-of-way. 3 and 4 are the illustration of proposed installations of a water main and a sewer main. We would like a drainage study and also a shared access agreement between the lots, because as it stands right now, Lot 3 and Lot 2 will not, unless TxDOT gives them approval, they will not have access to the frontage road and will instead have to go through Lot 1. And that is it. If you like, I can show the full conditions of approval.
I think we're good. Okay. Any questions? All right. Any public comment?
Good morning, Russell with SKG. On the conditions of approval, we'd request maybe a little variation to some of these items. Condition 2, submit a revised plat illustrating the frontage road to Loop 306. Typically, we do not show improvements like a frontage road on the plat. We just show boundary lines. Frontage roads and other features are always subject to change, and so we don't show those. We'd be happy to provide a separate document to staff so that they can see where it is, but not one specific to recording. And then for the drainage study, as we do not know at this time or in recordation prior to recording the plat what's going on those properties, the mall is looking to be able to market those, so they wanted to get an approval of the plat, and then they're going to market those for out parcels. And so our request would be for item 5 that we have the alternate or add to defer the drainage study to the permitting phase, because at that point in time we'll know what is going on there, what the improvements will be, and how to address any kind of drainage-related issues. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions?
To address the drainage, I'm looking up the right-of-way.
Okay, very good.
I emailed Lance Overstreet with Engineering Services last week, referencing this, and I never heard back from him. So it's been done in the past. If you look at previous approvals, and even in some of the plats that you have coming up, there are conditions in there that defer the drainage study to the permitting phase. This section of the ordinance that they typically refer to is a lot of times tied to raw land development, not kind of replats. You know, if you're going to be putting in a street or numerous streets and you need to evaluate what the public improvements are going to be, because as part of this plat, the only public improvements would be water and sewer mains. So that's why we're asking to defer it to the permitting phase.
Just out of curiosity, Russell, you mentioned on item 2 that you guys typically don't include the frontage road. Is there a reason why you don't feel comfortable doing that with this request, or?
Well, to show a frontage road or any improvement on a plat document is really a surveying boundary easements kind of document, and you don't typically show improvements because those improvements are always subject to change. So from what I'm reading here, it's saying show the frontage road in its physical form. Maybe I'm misreading that, but typically we just show, if you'll see here, we kind of have that dashed line. Typically we show and we call out right-of-way because you have to know that you have the appropriate right-of-way for your property. And so you show it physically. So we can continue to dashing through here if we need to. We just had these little insets, so we can try to move them out of the way to make room to show the rest of the right-of-way.
You just wanted to move it to the permit?
For the drainage study.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm okay with that.
Okay.
What Russell suggested, leaving this the way it is, if we had a separate document just showing the pavement edge. Basically, the idea is they're showing that that you abut a road that at least potentially you could access, rather than being the freeway. But what you proposed is fine. And on the drainage, I think, again, as long as we word that appropriately, that the development can't occur until a drainage plan has been submitted and approved. And I think I see Lance here, so typically this is an engineering requirement, and so we would typically not waive or defer that requirement without their input.
We're not waiving the requirement in its totality. We're deferring it to the actual permitting phase when we know what's going on there.
Okay.
Makes more sense to do it that way.
Thank you.
All right. So we good?
Yes, and again, they would, for each lot as it develops, they would have to provide a drainage plan, at least for that lot.
I had one more question. The proposed zoning is CGCH.
That is the current zoning.
Okay. So are they're asking to replat these 3 lots, correct? Yes, so we're not using CGCH zoning anywhere anymore, are we?
CGCH zoning is currently being utilized, but as we go about and do zone changes, we
phased
are
out.
phasing it out, correct?
Okay. So would this be an opportunity for us to maybe change the zoning to something that's conforming to that area as opposed to the broad CGCH?
It could be. Typically, we've done that when a property is being rezoned. We have typically not done it in a situation like this where, for their purposes, they have no need for rezoning. We could do that. We've discussed in the past of sort of looking wholesale at whole corridors or whole sections of the community and rezoning the CGCH to something else, but we've not done that in a case like this.
Okay.
That's not to say we couldn't if that was the direction from the commission and council.
Just to piggyback off that, would it do, I mean, I think he has a good point. Would it do any good? Would it save anybody any time in the future if we were to tackle that and get it over with? The customer is what I'm talking about. Would it if we approached what Travis is talking about and we did it, would doing that save the customer any time down the road?
It could. There are definitely areas where proactively going out and rezoning it to the district that is more consistent with the adopted plans might save a developer having to do that on their own and pay the fee and wait the time. One of the issues with that is that there are dozens of areas around the city, and so prioritizing which ones we tackle, trying to do that citywide would be a very big undertaking.
Yeah, it'd be daunting, sure, I'm with you.
I guess the greater concern that I have about these lots is that CGCH is a really broad zoning classification. I can't imagine that CH would be conforming to the other improvements in this area. I wouldn't think that we'd want to have CH type improvements in this area. So I thought it might be an opportunity for us to focus on zoning that was more consistent with what we wanted to see for improvements.
It could be, and if that's the direction of the commission, we could bring that back as a staff-initiated rezoning for either this piece or, I don't know if the whole mall is zoned that, but if so, cleaning that up for basically that whole mall area.
Any other questions or comments? Any more public comment? There being none, do I have a motion?
I'd like to move that we look at rezoning these lots to commercial general instead of CGCH, personally.
That really wouldn't need a motion,
Okay.
but if that's that could be direction to staff.
Yeah, and I would agree. I would agree.
Okay, so let's make a motion that would include this, the approval of the replat. You want to turn it into that and add in addition?
Okay. I move that we approve the replat, subject to zoning change to CG as opposed to CGCH for the tracks.
With the deferments on there?
Yes, with the deferments. I guess we're going to waive condition 2, or
We're going to move it all to permit?
is that okay, staff, or?
I have a question
Ask mine.
for Russell. The whole idea here is the mall is trying to sell those. Is this going to help or hurt their sale to have them rezoned?
The CGCH is a fairly broad zoning classification, so I don't know that having a CGCH zoning hurts them. The mall has a very intensive operating agreement use. It's tied with, so many restrictions and cross-access and what can go where and all of this other stuff. It's an animal in of itself of what the mall allows in out parcels and what these other retailers allow out in different locations. So the zoning really was not at all on our radar screen for this, and I don't know that I've ever been at a planning commission meeting where a zone change has been a condition of approval for a plat. Maybe it's legit and can be done, but that really wasn't our focus here today. If the city wants to initiate something, let's have a public hearing through that, and let's work through that venue appropriate to a zone change, but maybe let's let the plat kind of move forward as a plat and then do all the public side of separate for the zone change, and maybe it is the whole mall area if you want to pursue it that way. But let's let everybody in that area have an opportunity to kind of come in and be part of
That'd be great.
zone change conversation.
That's a good idea.
Great with that.
I agree.
Okay. All right, would you like to revise your?
So I think, given that, if that's agreeable, I think that the motion would be to approve the plat with any of the changes you already discussed on the conditions, but rather than adding a condition regarding the rezoning, just a simple direction to staff to bring back rezoning of this area.
Okay. So would you please bring back a rezoning proposal for this area? And then I move that we approve the condition 2, submit a revised plat. You've said that what Russell had proposed with a separate document was acceptable. Is that correct? So I move that we approve, subject to the document that you've said is acceptable for condition 2, and to defer the drainage on condition 5.
Permit.
To permit.
Okay, we have a motion. Do I have a second? Mark made the second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, and that carries.
Thank you.
Okay, the next one, B, is third replat of Block 1, Wade and Turner Edition.
Morning again,
That's all you can
Commissioners.
read.
Christina Iridia for the record. This is the third replat of Block 1, Wade and Turner Edition. This is the Baymont Hotel Inn and Suites, which is right here. This is North Bryant. So it is about 3.73 acres on the east side of US Highway 87, which is Bryant, and it is between 14th and 15th Street. It also has CGCH zoning on it, single-member district number 4 in the Blackshear neighborhood. This is what the proposed replat will look like. Currently, it is all one lot, very similar to the one we just had before. They're trying to divide it into 3 individual lots. Lot 3A is where the hotel is, and it will also have a flag down to Bryant. There are 3 variances that are associated with this request. The first we are recommending approval on, and that is that we allow West 14th Street. It is a minor collector, however, it pretty much operates as a local street, so we're requesting that variance be approved to allow it to have a 46-foot paving width instead of the 50-foot. The other variances involve sidewalks. We are recommending denial of the construction of sidewalks on US Highway 87 and also deny the variance to construct sidewalks along West 15th Street. So our rationale for denial. Number 1, detrimental to public safety. US Highway 87 North Bryant is a large capacity street. It operates at full capacity, and it would be dangerous for pedestrians to be walking adjacent to that street without the use of a sidewalk. We do not feel that the request is unique, as sidewalks are an aspect of development. There is no hardship that is created. We are willing to recommend deferral of some of the sidewalks until development, and I have a slide that will show that all for you guys. And we do not think it will vary other provisions because, once again, sidewalks are required where pedestrian traffic is anticipated. As these lots develop, we expect pedestrian and vehicular traffic to increase, thus requiring the need for sidewalks. So here is this little map I've created for you guys that highlights where we are requesting sidewalks. So the first I want to point out is the green right here. This is MLK. The city is actually constructing those sidewalks ourselves, and so that is not something that was entered into on this request. West 14th Street, we're only requesting sidewalks adjacent to Lot 3B as it develops, and we are willing to have those deferred to the time of permitting as development occurs for it. The same as Lot 3C. So along here, we are requesting that the variance be denied, but staff is willing to wait until permitting for those sidewalks to be placed. The last is sidewalks along West 15th Street for Lot 3A, which is right here, and also along Bryant, which is this little section right here. So those we are requesting be developed or constructed now because the lot is already developed, and those will then tie into the sidewalks along Martin Luther King and along 3C and 3B as they're developed.
There's just one correction. This is not. So just ignore that segment of that orange, because what we're recommending is that you give a full variance for any sidewalks along 14th. So everything that Ms. Christina has drawn is exactly the way that we're recommending it, with the exception of that one circle. A full variance on 14th, defer the construction of the sidewalk on that orange segment for Lot 3C until they actually come in and they permit. since the Beaumont Inn is already in the back, do that blue segment, and that one little blue segment along Bryant, because that line actually extends past the driveway that's out there, and it'd be awkward for folks to kind of build the sidewalk and then they can't even cross that line legally, and we can't compel another property owner to do that. So if this property owner puts in that blue, this is what we're recommending, so that we'll have a continuous sidewalk pedestrian connection. Does that make sense?
Also, that is their driveway, so it won't be a sidewalk all the way. It'll mainly be sidewalk ramps and then however many inches or feet it takes to connect to the adjacent lot. So it will be very minor. Are there any questions on this before I continue?
Any questions?
Are there sidewalks to the east of there on 14th and 15th?
On 15th Street right here?
East of there. I understand 87 is out in front of it, but I'm talking about behind it. Are there sidewalks down that
Yes, sir.
15th and 14th Street?
Yes, sir. On 15th.
On 15th, but not 14th.
One of the reasons we're not requesting it along 14th is that the way that their parking lot is, and then it would pretty much destroy the entrance to the parking lot. And since it is a collector street, not a local, we can't require it per section 10382 of the subdivision ordinance.
Any other questions?
Okay, so here we are. We are recommending approval of the replat. We're recommending approval of the variance for 14th Street to allow it to have the 46-foot paving width. And we are recommending denial of the variance for sidewalk construction along West 15th Street and along Highway US 87 with the we are okay with lots 3C and 3B being deferred until the time of development. So here is, this is actually just the summary of our conditions. Number one, the copy of the taxes. Number two, that along US Highway 87, which is Bryant, that Lot 3A build their little driveway approach, and 3B and 3C are done at time of permitting. And along West 15th Street, that it is once again done at time of permitting for Lot 3C, but Lot 3A, we are requesting that those sidewalks be built now. And then lastly, number three, that they submit plans for street improvement by 2 feet for West 14th Street, or get the variance that they have requested here today. If you guys like, I can read the full conditions into the record.
I think we're good. Thank you.
And that concludes my presentation.
All right, thank you, ma'am. Any public comment?
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Kevin Albright with KT Plus Investments. First point I'd like to make, to my knowledge, there are no sidewalks continuing east on 15th Street where they're requesting us to build a sidewalk to headed east. Secondly, this plat was already approved 3 years ago and through oversight of, I think you're filing it and you think I'm filing it. It did not get filed. So when we came back to correct that oversight, then the sidewalks came into play. This being an area that's already well developed, we don't see hardly any pedestrian traffic around this area. There's not a lot of retail draw. The people that come from Dallas to come to our hotel usually drive in. They drive out to go wherever they're going to eat. We don't see a great deal of pedestrian traffic here. And when we're talking about doing the curb cuts in the boulevard, recently we were in negotiations with Chick-fil-A to sell that property, and they were going to buy the whole front and remove the boulevard and move it further to the north. So if we do that now, and the next person, and Chick-fil-A may continue and come back to try and purchase the property in a year or so, we'd be putting that money and spending time and effort and money to get those cut in when they may eventually be removed and the boulevard may be moved to a different location. Again, I see we're going to build a sidewalk on 15th Street that continues to nowhere. I understand Martin Luther King may have some pedestrian traffic, but as the city said, they're going to go ahead and take care of that, and it will continue on to somewhere. Other than that, everything else that the staff has gone with, we go with also.
Any questions?
The only thing that you're opposing is that one little strip of sidewalk on 15th?
Yes, and the curb cuts and the curb cuts on 87, where eventually that boulevard may not be there anymore.
Right.
Would you be amenable to deferring that section to when lots 3, C, and B are developed?
Yes, in the permitting phase, yes.
Okay. Any other questions for Kevin? Thank you, sir.
Thank you for your time.
Any other public comment?
Could the staff please get us up to speed on the sidewalks on 15th Street? That seems to be an area of disagreement between the owner and the staff.
Lance is coming up.
I think the answer is that there are some sidewalks between Martin Luther King and Chadbourne, but it's not continuous. The immediate blocks to the east, those first blocks, do not have sidewalks. But if you go another block or two, then there are sidewalks. So it's definitely a non-continuous system. But again, this is how sidewalks get built,
Yeah, I mean,
is a piece at a time. If we said we would never build a sidewalk adjacent to where there's no sidewalks, we would never build them.
Yeah.
And if I could just address one more point that he made, in some ways, sidewalks aren't always for the development that's there. Will everyone who comes to this hotel walk? Probably not. But there are people who live in the neighborhoods behind this that would likely walk to a Chick-fil-A if it was there, or another service or restaurant. And so part of the reason for those, just like those streets, aren't just to get to the hotel, they're to get traffic in and through the neighborhood. The sidewalks would be to get in and through that neighborhood.
Deferring to permit, though, would make sense, right? Because then we would know
Yeah,
more.
and again, staff's recommendation is we're okay with deferring that to permit, with the exception, again, this blue area, he cannot commit the purchaser of this lot to construct sidewalks off of their lot. In other words, in that blue area. And so the trouble that we have is having any teeth when this lot develops. If they don't also construct the sidewalks in that blue area, we might have a gap of just literally 20 feet.
Understand that.
As well as this other blue one. Again, we can't compel them to do that at that time. If we could, that's what we would be recommending.
I just want to state that we've had this argument before, but I think there's a time and place for sidewalks. If there's a chance later on that a piece of property is going to be re-subdivided or something, and then at that time could get a sidewalk. But what are the odds that if you drove it, that those houses on 15th Street are ever going to have to put a sidewalk in? I mean, it's just not going to happen. There's places that it will,
right,
but not there. But
well,
anyway, I just want to bring that up.
Okay.
Okay.
I wouldn't have a problem with deferring on 15th, but I understand what John is saying on 87 completely.
Go ahead, Lance.
Lance Overstreet Engineering Services. I went on the phone and actually did Street View, and the block immediately east on 15th Street does not have sidewalk, but you go a block or two down further and they do. The block on 14th Street, though, does have sidewalk immediately right after it. One thing that the MLK project is doing is that we are making a continuous pedestrian access way from the loop all the way to 29th Street on MLK. So that entire area is going to have sidewalk along MLK on that side of the roadway. And our contractor has actually stated on several occasions that one of their biggest problems is the pedestrian traffic coming down MLK, just having people going through that side all the time. So one reason that I believe that the intention to put that traffic way or the public pedestrian right-of-way is because with all that traffic, if you put a restaurant there, you're going to have traffic coming from MLK. And then additionally, 2 lots down, if you guys recall, we also replatted that just a couple blocks down for the Taco Bueno. And so we are going to start seeing a lot more pedestrian access from MLK and from that neighborhood and towards the Bryan area. And so that is something that we are, as you put more restaurants in, if you have pedestrian foot traffic, you're going to, have that natural migration there. So.
Okay. Thank you, sir. Other questions? Any other public comment? All right, there being none, do I have a motion?
I move that we approve as the city's recommended. Approve the replat of Block 1, approve the variance to allow West 14th to maintain the 46-foot street width, deny the variances for the sidewalks.
All right.
Yeah.
Of deferring the other segments for permitting.
Correct.
Okay.
And that was okay with them, as I understand it, to defer it. Isn't that what he said?
Yes.
Okay.
It was okay with the contractor on the front, not on the sides.
Okay.
He's okay with this, deferring those. He just did not want to do this or this.
That's
What we're recommending is that they do this, and I believe that that's what Commissioner Stribling is asking today, to defer,
Correct.
with the exception of this orange, to defer everything that's orange to permitting, to require the current landowner, before he records his plat, to do those blue segments, to approve the plat, and to approve a variance so that nothing is required on 14th.
Okay. Okay.
I'm going to give the second.
Okay. Okay. Joe seconded it, but let's discuss just a little bit longer. Okay. I've got a question.
Let's put the map up, Christina.
So my question is, the blues, we're saying that we want them to put those sidewalks in now. We will not defer those.
So they have up to 3 years to record this plat.
Okay.
So he has, and he can also put in a bond, he can put in an agreement. He has plenty of options in lieu of installing the sidewalk today. But the requirement will be upon him to do so before this plat is recorded. That's the only thing that we're recommending, that those blue segments, that they either install them today, they defer them, he hold off recording for 3 years, any of those things. Everything that's orange can be deferred until those 2 lots, C and B, are actually in the permitting stage and they know what they want to build.
In our thought process for making them do the others right now, even though they're not done at this moment, okay, is because you're afraid they're not going to do them later?
Yeah, the reason we can defer the orange is because we're deferring them to the permit process. Because the hotel is already here, there's no future permit process for them to go through. And so there's no point to defer it to, basically. So we have to put in the obligation now. But as Rebecca mentioned, they can defer it by providing a bond or letter of credit to put up the financial guarantee, basically, and still wait to do it until those properties develop. That's always their option as well.
Okay, so Rebecca, let me make sure I understand. So you're also saying that the blue that's on 15th Street and on 87, those sidewalks would not have to be done up to 3 years if they did not record the plat?
So basically what that condition means is that a developer has the ability to hold off recording a plat once it goes through the planning commission for 3 years. So he can effectively have his plat approved here and then have almost 3 years to sell the property and then actually record that physical document. So that's if he wants to wait 3 years and then go through that process and bring in the people. What he also has the ability to do is put up a bond or a letter of credit now. That allows him to record now because he's satisfied that condition. So if he's ready to go right now, he has those 2 options to move right now. But if he just wants to have this plat approved here and be able to go to the owner and say, look, I am ready to go. When you are ready to sell, let me go ahead and figure out how we're going to build these sidewalks, and then we'll record this plat and we can move forward. So he has a lot of options moving forward, even though we put that condition of approval on there.
Okay, so whenever they built the hotel, I don't remember what year that was, but whenever
It was 14, it was built.
Okay, when they built the hotel, at that point in time, no sidewalks were required.
Well, that one block was a single lot that had existed for decades, I think. And so there was no platting, because they weren't splitting the block up into multiple pieces, there was no trigger point for the subdivision ordinance to trigger the sidewalks.
Yeah, because it's kind of hard to go back to someone that's already,
Had it
you know,
approved,
and
then-
again, that has been such an improvement to North Angelo. To go back and require them to spend money to do a sidewalk that we didn't, that they weren't required to when they built the hotel, that's just kind of, I don't know, for me, it's not pro-business very well. But, I mean, I also understand you got to start somewhere, and if you don't start somewhere, we just will not have sidewalks anywhere. So we just keep wanting to put off where that first sidewalk's going to have to be at, so.
I think the counter to that point is that they want to subdivide this into 3 lots versus the 1 lot that they've had. And that's
The
what's
trigger point,
triggered-
the
That's
trigger
what's
point.
triggered this discussion.
West 15th Street is a local street, and it is a substandard local street. So we're asking them to improve it to what our subdivision ordinance requires that they do at time of plating.
Okay, we have a first and a second, but
They
because
already approved this one
we're asking so many
without
questions
the
during this, I want to go ahead and have one more public comment, okay? So that the owner gets to speak.
Good morning.
State your name, please.
Tom DeLauder, and I am one of the owners of this property. 3 years ago, when we went to replatting all this, sidewalks were not required, and we were going to 3 lots, and the hotel was already built. Sidewalks were not ever mentioned at that point. When I went, I did not know it wasn't filed. When I thought I had a piece of property sold, and I went in, and the legal description wasn't right, it was still showing 1 piece of property, that's when they told me I had to put sidewalks in.
Okay, so you've replatted this, but it wasn't
It
filed,
didn't get filed.
but it was approved.
Yes.
We did an administrative subdivision, an amended plat in error. We didn't catch 3 years ago, we didn't catch that this was, no, actually it was less, that was about 2 years ago. We didn't catch that this was 3, okay, it was 3 years ago.
It was 3 years ago.
We didn't catch that both 15th was substandard and 14th substandard, so that was a staff error. We should have never administratively approved an administrative plat. It just should not have happened. But now we've caught it, and now we can correct the
And
error.
a mistake. So, I mean, mistakes happen
Okay.
in everybody's business every day.
It does, but again, so it was approved in your eyes, but it wasn't approved in the big scheme of things?
It got the necessary approvals, but again, those are often done with conditions, and they meet all the conditions and then take it to the county and file it. They never took it to the county and filed it, and therefore the expiration, plats are only good for a certain time, like Rebecca just mentioned on this one, 3 years.
This one was 6
So-
months for the administrative.
So once that expiration date hit and they hadn't filed it, then it's as if it never happened.
Okay, so, and that was 3 years ago, so has it already expired?
Yes, I went in and they told me it wasn't expired, and so I went to refile it. And then they said, no, it expired after 6 months. They first told me I had 3 years, and I was in that 3 years. And that was whenever we had the 14th Street, we had the lot 3B sold to Bush's Chicken. And so we were going through permitting on that. And I still had time, they told me, to get that replat done. Then when Bush's backed out, and I said, I need to get this done anyway. And so we started, and then they said, no, it expired 6 months. I said, well, where did the 3 years go?
And that's related to the original mistake, because the original plat should have been a full plat that comes to the commission, in which case it would have had 3 years. Because at the time it was done as an administrative plat, administratively approved plats only have 6 months before they expire.
But regardless, 3 years has passed since the original approval. So even if it was 6 months or 3 years,
But it
it
wasn't
expired.
passed. It wasn't passed when I was in there.
Oh, okay.
It was not passed. I still had like 6 months to get it done, and so I started trying to get it done. And then whenever it did all expire is when I went back and I had to get the Bart Johnson to come back and redraw everything with the hotel on it. I mean, we've started back at scratch, and I was told then that it was just going to be an administrative deal, and then it didn't go administrative. We got all these conditions on it. And so that's when they told me that my next plan would be to come here. So what I had asked originally was that we didn't have to put where the blue sidewalks are on 15th Street, that I was fine with them on the 14th and the Bryant as those lots sold and they were developed.
Okay.
And then they told me, no, I would have to come and ask for that variance from y'all. And I even asked if I could put the sidewalks on 15th Street, back where the hotel site is, after the city did Martin Luther King, and after Lot 3C was sold and developed. At development of 3C, we would continue that sidewalk back to Martin Luther King, because I was going to put a condition of the sale of 3C that when that owner bought it, he carried the sidewalk through my property as well, as an expense to him and not me.
So is that possible over here? I understand what you're saying, and that could be.
Yeah, that makes sense.
That would make sense.
Great.
Yeah,
When
I think
three-
that
We'd
makes
still
sense.
get what the city wants, but we would get it at the time. So, Rebecca, is there any reason we can't? Oh, okay.
And that eliminates me having to be a personal guarantor, that eliminates me having to get a bond, that eliminate. Now, I can go ahead and do those curb cuts and handicap ramps on 87 if that's a requirement of the deal. There again, I felt like that those should be done at development.
Right. So how do you feel about that?
Well, the short answer is you can require that. If he chooses not to do that and not honor the commitment he's making to you today, we would have no legal recourse to hold up development of this site. We can't
We
condition it.
can't make that as part of our requirement?
No, because then you're obligating the purchaser of this to do something off his property, which we don't have the ability to do. The owner can do that through the purchase agreement like he's saying, but if he chooses not to do that, we would have no way to come back and make them do that.
Once the plat's recorded, the plat is recorded.
That really is, that's not a condition. I mean, you can say anything that you want as conditions, but that's not, that's just accepting a promise with no remedy. And
It's only as
the
good as
way-
they are, which they're pretty dang good.
Well,
Yeah.
the only process that you have in the ordinance is if the sidewalk should be placed in there, is that it either goes in before the plat's recorded, or money is posted, or a letter of credit, or some other security, so that if it didn't go in, the city could put the sidewalk in. That's the process that you'd be required to follow. The proposal is that the developer would take care of it in some other way other than the way that the ordinance provides, which is through security. And the city would not be a party to that sales contract, and it's not within the scope really of your authority to require that at this time, even if you want, if the developer didn't want it. So you have no enforcement on it whatsoever. It'd be better just not to say anything about it.
Okay.
May I bring up one other thing?
State your name,
The
please.
site- Oh, Kevin Albright. Thank you. Is that area where the sidewalks are actually being built doesn't belong to us anymore? It belongs to the city, is that correct?
I believe you own it.
So would they not be able to require on city-owned property that was done at the time of sale or permitting?
Well, the short answer is no. I mean, technically, that's not on the owner's property. Sidewalks are typically built in the city right-of-way, but our subdivision ordinance has obligations to a property owner to improve in the right-of-way, including streets, sidewalks, utilities, et cetera. So while it isn't on the subject property, it is our tools to require infrastructure improvements is through the subdivision ordinance. So short of, if you don't make that a requirement today, we have no ability to come back and make that happen. Again, the legal authority for us to require it is either at the subdivision, which is where we are now, or at the permitting stage. So if you trust that they're going to do what they say they're going to do, you could eliminate that requirement as a condition, and we can just hope that they follow through on that. That's up to you, but your legal mechanism to require it is now.
What is the length, what is the length of the blue sidewalk on 15th Street that is 280 feet?
That's going to be my vote.
The deal is, several of you know us personally. I know that doesn't matter. We're about, every man in this partnership is a man of his word. If we tell you something, that's better than any piece of paper you're going to get.
Okay, thank you. All right, I'm going to close public comment now. We've got a first by Travis, right? I've already forgotten, and we've got a second by Joe at this point. Okay, and remind us, you just did it as it was brought.
As recommended by the
As
staff.
recommended.
And I seconded as recommended.
Okay, so on that vote, who votes in favor? Say aye.
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 All right, so, and who opposes?
Aye.
Aye. So we have 3-3 at this point. Mark, Sammy, and I are against, and Travis and Joe and Terry are for.
So that fails to get a majority approval, so now another motion
Okay.
would be in order.
So would you like to make another motion?
Yes, that doesn't, allows him the variance on the blue piece. Everything else as staff recommendation.
The blue on 15th or the blue
Yes.
on 87 also?
The blue on 15th,
But not on 87?
not on 87.
So, just for clarification, are your request, is your motion so that this is not, they do not have to build it, or that it's deferred to the time of development per the applicant's promise?
Deferred to the time of development that they said
Well-
they would do.
Yeah, I think we decided that we couldn't make that as a
Okay.
condition, so
We
we'll
just
just
haven't
leave
gone the
that,
word
leave that
that
off.
they're going to do it.
Okay.
Sammy?
Yes,
Okay, so you made the motion?
yes.
Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Mark seconded. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye. Okay, so and opposed?
Nay.
Okay, so Joe and Travis voted nay. That passed 4-2. All right.
Thank you.
Moving along. The third replat in Block 2, Sunset Ranch Estates, Section 2.
Yeah.
Reads, it's just one.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
It's just one for each of us.
Morning.
That last night.
Good morning, Planning Commissioners. Jeff Fisher, Senior Planner with the City of San Angelo. Our next case today is the third replat in Block 2, Sunset Ranch Estates, Section 2. It's on 3.795 acres southwest of South US Highway 277 and Grand Canal Road. These are the properties here delineated in red. Lot 17 and 17C and 17D are zoned currently office warehouse, OW, and lot 16K1, as proposed, is RS1. So this area here is the RS1. The rest of it is currently OW. The applicant has a zone change that will be presented later today to rezone this piece, along with this, will be acquired by one owner, and that will all be RS1. The remainder up here would stay OW. SMD number 1, Tommy Hebert's district in the Country Club neighborhood. So here's a breakdown of the proposed replat. The applicant's proposing to combine land from the first replat, which is the area down here, and the second replat all together into a third replat. And the reason for this is they had come in several months back and had left this remnant half-acre triangle, which was not part of the plat. Under the subdivision ordinance rules, you can't leave a landlocked remnant piece, and so these two owners here that wanted to replat 17C and D negotiated and worked out with this owner here for them to acquire the landlocked parcel, making it one lot. And so basically at the same time as all of this will now get recorded concurrently. The subject plat conforms to the city's comprehensive plan and the intent of purpose statements. The preliminary plat for this area was further south and did not include these subject portions, so no need to do that review. So as mentioned in your staff report, the applicant is requesting full variances from any improvements on Grand Canal Road, which abuts the property. The current right-of-way width on Grand Canal is 50 feet and needs to be 60 feet as a collector, so that would be an additional 5 feet of right-of-way on their side of the road. The second variance request is from the paving width. The existing pavement width is approximately 28 feet, and for a collector needs to be 50. So staff did a review of all of the previous phasing in this area when we reviewed the context on whether to support the variances on this plat. The original Section 1, which was off of Templin Road, did get full variances from right-of-way and paving width, as did Section 2, which is the Grand Canal Court. When we got to Clarice Court and that plat back in, I believe it was 2005, staff at that time, the development in that area south of Country Club Road and also along here was fully built out. The original plat, this was only going to be one lot. This was only going to be one lot, and as you can see, there's a lot more development than that today. So staff recommended denial of those variances, and the City Planning Commission at the time had settled for half of the paving width, which, by the way, is only today's requirement in the subdivision ordinance anyway. So they had to pave the additional half here. We're just asking for the same request here, that they pave. The right-of-way dedication, there was, in the previous staff reports, because the U.S. government owned this canal here, there was hope that at the time, 10 years ago, the government was going to dedicate the additional right-of-way space that the city needed. That never happened, and so we really would like the right-of-way as well as a paving width. Here's a further breakdown of the existing road network as you expand outward. A lot of this is still in the ETJ, but you're familiar with Holscher Farm Estates along here and further development. City engineer is here for any further questions on this, but he has indicated the city has had to acquire additional right-of-way and paving width as you go along this portion of Country Club. And then, as I mentioned, as you go along Grand Canal, we've missed the opportunity in the past to get the right-of-way and the paving width with these subdivisions. So this, combined with the increasing intense development along Country Club Road, would be justification for acquiring the variances today. So our variance requests are to set aside the first variance from Chapter 9.3A5. This is a redundant request. As you know, 9.3A5 and Chapter 10.3A2 are basically the same thing. So we're setting aside the variance from right-of-way and paving width in Chapter 9 because it's already being asked for in Chapter 10. And we're setting aside a request for a sidewalk along Grand Canal, given the predominantly industrial development along there. We are recommending, as mentioned, a denial, though, of the variance from Chapter 10.3A1 to allow Grand Canal, a collector street, to maintain 50-foot right-of-way in lieu of 60 feet. And we're denying the request for a variance from Chapter 10.3A2 to allow Grand Canal Road, a collector street, to maintain 28 feet of paving instead of the required 50. Rationale for approval is as follows. I've kind of summarized this already, so I'll go quickly. The increased lot yield in the area, the Holscher Farms Estates and those other developments on Country Club, combined with the expanded development as you go up Grand Canal Road, are justification for a variance. If we don't, or not for a variance, if we don't get it now, we may miss the opportunity. As mentioned, the federal government hasn't had any discussions, as far as we know, with the city to ever dedicate the additional right-of-way, so this would also be a chance to get it. As mentioning, those two sections to the south, they're originally full single lots. There were 2 lots. Today, with these developments, you've got 2 facing Grand Canal as this plat, and then Clarice Court, which ended up going from 1 to 14 lots. So you've got 16 additional lots, and probably several lots as those get replatted on Country Club. Holscher, I think, was about maybe 20 or 30 lots, so this could continue. We don't believe there's any uniqueness to the situation. The subdivision ordinance would require any new development to pave half their additional improvements. We also don't believe there's a hardship. Engineering services had updated us. There's no known topographical or drainage constraints. And finally, we believe that it would vary the provisions of the subdivision ordinance if the variance was granted. Granting variances would subvert the subdivision process in this case, given the increased development yield. Public notification went out, 18 notifications within the surrounding area, provided that one letter in favor of the request under this adjacent owner to the east. So staff recommendation in summary is to approve the replat, set aside the variance from Chapter 93A5 for dedication of street right-of-way, the redundant request, set aside the variance from Chapter 9.5 for a sidewalk in Grand Canal, but to deny the variance from 103A1 to allow Grand Canal to maintain 50 feet of right-of-way instead of 60, and to deny the variance from Chapter 103A2 to allow Grand Canal, a collector, to maintain 28 feet of paving instead of the required 50. Any questions or comments?
No, sir. Any public comment?
Good morning, Russell with SKG Engineering. Be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions for Russell?
With respect to the conditions of approval, on item 4, condition 4, concerning the right-of-way and street pavement width, we would be okay dedicating the 5 foot of additional right-of-way on our half, but we would request a variance for the street improvements. In the city's evaluation of their finding a reason to support the variance, they left out that and I don't know the exact time frame, but in 2008 to 2010, the city went in and made improvements to Grand Canal and Country Club Road from 277 to the west, where the city limit lines ends there for Country Club Road. So most of the residential subdivision, those that Jeff referred to, those lots were already platted, and a lot of houses were under construction. So the city at that time made a determination that the current width is appropriate, and so we don't feel that it's fair to require in this case, a replat, kind of dividing up 2 parcels to widen a street that serves, other areas. This is really in our opinion, a public issue that the public should take care of through the city, not a private individual who's doing a development who's increasing a significant amount of traffic on the road. If you look at their 243 feet of frontage they have on Grand Canal, that represents 2.4% or less of that whole segment of roadway that the city had widened in that 2008-2010 timeframe. So we'd ask for the variance from the street improvements, and then we would ask that the condition 5 for the drainage study, again, be deferred to the permitting stage for this, much like conditions 2 and 3 are, that they have the state in there that the condition can be deferred to the permitting stage. And then condition 6 says the note on lot 17D states unobstructed private road easement for the benefit of lot 17C. Looking at the plat, in the way they want to share an entrance. So there's already an entrance that serves lot 17D is actually a functioning, built-out, operating entity. And so they want to sell off where 17C is going to go, but only have one entrance. And so the easement is for the benefit of 17C, giving them access to enter onto 17D to get to the entrance. And that's something I think we can work out with staff.
Russell, just I think it was for clarification because the adjacent lot to the north, just go back really quick. So we noticed on the aerials that 17C, that part made sense, but we also thought it was for 17B because it didn't appear that 17B had an access either. The triangle to the north.
And this is something we can work out with staff. It doesn't really impact us of any significance. We'll just work out whatever the verbiage needs to be with staff. We can determine exactly where that entrance is, who it needs to serve, and we'll get it straight with staff. We're okay with that. Our main deal would just be the variance for the variance from the roadway improvements and to defer the drainage study until the permitting stage. And it's just a point of interest. The previous plat didn't have any comment at all about a drainage study, so ours tend to, others tend to not at times. So be happy to answer any other questions.
Any other questions?
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other public comment? All right, there being none, do I have a motion?
The recommendation, there we are.
I move that we approve as recommended by the staff.
I'll second that.
Made the motion, Joe seconded it. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, we passed 6-0. Moving on to rezonings. Z 1710 Taylor.
Good morning, Planning Commission. My name is Hillary Bucher, Senior Planner for the City of San Angelo. I'm here to present Z 1710 Taylor. It's 0.5 acres. It's a landlocked parcel north of Clears Court in reference to Jeff's previous presentation, Single Member District 1, Tommy Hebert Country Club neighborhood. If you look at the map on your left, it shows the future land use as traditional, or I'm sorry, it's a transitional, and the existing zoning is office warehouse. We're looking to attach it with this previous plat to the residential to the south. So this is a kind of an aerial shot. You can see the home was being built at the time, but it kind of gives you an idea of the surrounding areas. So this is actually looking from the current property towards the back of the home. The home would be approximately there, and then the front of the home on your right-hand side. So we believe that this is transitional, this future land use, and will act as a buffer between the single-family residential and the office warehouse and industrial to the east. It's consistent with the zoning ordinance in that the entire lot now will be zoned RS1, and it is adjacent to single-family residential, so it continues those existing uses. Properties adjacent to Grand Canal Court have been developed commercially, but properties to the south residential. There's no anticipated negative uses or negative effects on the environment. And this property has remained vacant for probably over 10 years, so this would actually include it in that lot and combine it all together. And development patterns to the west is predominantly residential. So we mailed out 10 notices and received 0 in favor and 0 in opposition. We are recommending approval of the rezoning from office warehouse to single-family residential with the approval of the previous plat to combine it with that residential lot. Do y'all have any questions for me?
No, ma'am, we
Thank
did
you.
good.
Thank you.
Any public comment?
Stepping back just one.
Go ahead and state your name again.
Russell with SKG. So Travis, you didn't want to allow us to defer the drainage study? Okay,
have to
so
reopen that public
so we'll have this zoning approved, and just say, for instance, the plat doesn't go through and is never recorded, we'll have 2 different zonings on this property. Or is there a way that the city needs to protect themselves that if we never file this plat that you just approved, that this zone change doesn't go through?
What would be the
You
answer to
approve the
that
zone
question?
change, then you have this property is now split by zoning. The reason we're doing the zone change is because it's tied to the replat.
The isolated piece, that triangle, meets the minimum requirement. In other words, we don't have the right to deny the plat, staff doesn't, and staff doesn't have the right to deny your rezoning because you meet the minimum standards for the office warehouse district under the plat, so that's why that can move forward. The rezoning can move forward as an RS1 because the intent is to combine it with the residential piece. But what I'm saying is that staff's hands are tied in terms of what recommendations we can make to this board.
Do you not want it to be rezoned?
No, we're fine with it being rezoned if the plat is actually recorded. If the
okay.
plat's not recorded, then now you've severed, and you have two different zonings on this one current piece of property. You know, the tract is platted as, by itself as Lot A.
No, it's platted with the residential tract to the south.
No, it's a half acre that's been sold in 2014 to that tract. This plat is not in effect yet. This plat is not.
It is not, but we can't put a condition of approval on a rezoning. So we can't
Okay.
make the rezoning contingent on the plat because we don't
Okay,
have
so,
that right.
so the zoning will proceed irrespective of what happens to the plat. Okay, we're good with
Are
that.
you okay with that? Okay.
We are. It was just more of a, in John's thinking there, it's more of something that the city doesn't split zoning on one piece of property. Something we've always fought against, but now we're going to have the condition to where that could happen.
In this case, we're hoping that things move forward fast enough to be able to remedy it, but.
Yeah, we're hoping, yeah.
Staff's hands are tied. We couldn't deny either because they meet the minimum requirements in both cases.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Any other public comment? All right. There being none, do I have a motion?
Move
Move
to approve.
stated.
And then I second it.
Mark made the motion, Terry seconded. All in favor, say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Any opposed? All right, 6-0.
Thank you.
Very good. Okay, so now we're down to right-of-way vacations and abandonments. City Council has final authority for approval of the vacation and abandoning of public right-of-way.
Off one?
Am I off one? Did I miss Burnett? Oh, sorry about that. Going back.
All right.
Again, I can't see a blame thing. Z1711 Burnett. I'll bring my glasses.
You want me to hold that over here for you?
Valerie, is there a way to go back on the one that we made before and defer the drainage study? Is there a way to do
We
that?
reopen it?
Like we did in that previous
You
case?
have the right to reopen a public hearing and modify.
Would you be
anything
okay with that,
Okay,
Travis?
so
That's fine.
Yeah.
we'll
I
reopen
thought
the.
that-
Motion and a
We just
second
forgot
to
to
My
do
motion
it.
wasn't intended to,
Yeah,
Okay.
right.
yeah.
So we're going back on the previous, we're going back on the previous
It
one?
would take a motion to, I think, reconsider.
Right, you need a motion and a second to reconsider the third
Okay, so
replat.
let's have a motion to reconsider it.
I'll make a motion to reconsider it.
Sammy made the motion. Mark seconded. All in favor, say aye.
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 No opposed? All right, now we're reopening for public comment, right?
You don't have to have public comment.
Okay,
You
very
could
good.
just
Then
make a
let's
new-
just redo
new
the
motion.
motion.
I would like to make the motion exactly like Travis presented it with deferring the drainage study.
Okay, very good. So we have that motion from Sammy. Do I have a second? Oh, Joe seconded. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? 6-0. Okay, now we're moving back to the Burnett one.
Okay. Hello again. This is Christina with the City of San Angelo for the record. So this is going to look just a little familiar because the lot in question right now is the one directly to the northeast of the lot you just approved. So you just approved this rezoning right here, and now we're doing that rezoning right there, which is all part of the plat that you just looked at before. So it is, the lot in question is 1.5 acres. It is about 1,200 feet south of, southwest of US Highway 87 in single-member District Number 1, Country Club neighborhood. So as you can see here, it is currently future land use of industrial, and it is currently a planned development with an underlying office warehouse zoning. So PD 1302 was approved a few years ago, and that was because the applicant wanted to do a business that was not necessarily allowed by itself outright in an office warehouse, so he did a PD and utilized that for the last few years. However, now the business use is changing, and it no longer qualifies for what is allowed under the PD because the requirements were very stringent, but it is allowed under office warehouse. So we're asking today to remove the PD and keep the office warehouse that it originally was. So here are some photos, the front view of it and the existing metal building that is already in place. If you look northeast towards, can't really see it there, but way up there is US Highway 87, and then southwest, here are those residences that were mentioned earlier. So our rationale for approval is that it is consistent with the comprehensive plan because under the comprehensive plan, it is zoned industrial, it has a future land use of industrial. The proposed business is consistent with office warehouse. And as shown on earlier, the section of the part of the plat and the rezoning is a transitional on the future land use map, which would be a nice buffer between what the industrial is of this use and the residences to the south. Change conditions is that the PD is no longer required or necessary, so we're requesting to go back to office warehouse. As the site is already somewhat developed, we don't anticipate adverse effects on the environment. Any that would happen would be temporary if they were to build more buildings. Community need is demonstrated through the fact that the area still shows on a comprehensive plan as being industrial, and the transitional to the southwest allows a nice buffer, which is also compatible with our plans. So we have received no notices returned in response of opposition or in favor, and we are recommending approval of the rezoning. Do you have any questions for me?
Questions? No, ma'am. Thank you. Public comment? There being none, do I have a motion?
Make a motion to move it to office warehouse, rezone it.
Second.
Okay, Terry made the motion and Sammy seconded it. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? 6-0. Now we're moving on to the right-of-way vacations and abandonment. City Council has final authority for the approval of the vacation and abandoning of public right-of-way. A Street right-of-way vacation and abandonment of a portion of South Marie Street. Ricky Brown.
Good morning, Commissioners. Jeff Fisher again, Senior Planner with the City of San Angelo. The request today is for a vacation and right-of-way abandonment for a portion of South Marie Street. I may be familiar with this area. This is Roosevelt Street, and this is Bryan. Marie actually goes all the way up to Culbertson, but it's just the area in here to the south. The applicant had submitted this request. They own the Taka, Texas pickle bottling plant immediately adjacent. They wanted to acquire this right-of-way for additional space for a driveway or parking. They basically just wanted to pave it and have the additional land. The total square footage is 28,000 square feet. It's 70 feet wide by 400 feet long, so that's that total. And it's kind of right on the line of the two districts, Harry Thomas and Lucy Gonzalez's district in the Fort Concho neighborhood. So we looked at the future land use and the zoning. It's commercial and industrial in the future land use plan, and the zoning is CGCH. Through the right-of-way abandonment, if the owner has requested to acquire the entire portion, so the zoning would actually go to entire CGCH. These are some photos looking north. So there's the Talk of Texas facility. It's a collegiate road as it currently stands. And this is looking south. Staff did a site visit and looked at previous case history in this area. We did not see any other vehicles that would use that street at present. It doesn't mean there couldn't be. It acts as a rear porch area. Some of the crew are outside eating lunch, so it's generally used exclusively by Talk of Texas at present. This is the north portion of South Marie Street, not part of the request, looking towards Culbertson, and this is west on Bryan Street facing South Bell. The immediate adjacent properties, we wanted to see if they possibly would have used or may use access off of the south portion. The two residential properties up here would front onto, would use Albertson, and so probably would not come down South Marie. The storage facility immediately north has an access off of South Bell, not off of the side portion, so again would probably use Bryan and go right to Bell. This is the existing parking lot at the adjacent property. As you can see, it's pretty cluttered. A lot of the cars end up parking on the south side of South Marie. So having the additional space, they could pave more parking. They could add more driveway area, and hopefully would reduce some of that clutter that we see going on here. Here's a breakdown of the site and the surrounding area. This is the portion of South Marie that was proposed to be abandoned. As part of this request, the applicant has indicated through negotiations with the city that they would be willing to allow the city an easement along the east portion of South Bell Street on their property for a future city sidewalk and water main. So as part of that would be a condition of approval. This is a zoom out of the area. As you can see, these are predominantly collegiate roads as you go towards the east. So staff believes that we looked at several rationale for the approval. One, we talked about the existing traffic circulation patterns. Our only concern may have been that the city maintenance facility, which operates here, there is a flag portion you can't see here of a future right-of-way owned by the city and a private property that comes down here. The planned development area for the future city maintenance facility would actually be further east, so we don't believe that would be affected. If the city ever did have to acquire right-of-way here, they could access off of St. Anne. They would never, it doesn't appear that we would ever need to come up this far. So really this portion, based on our analysis, seems to be only used by Talk of Texas. Final point on this, we looked at some case history, 1975 case for someone actually had attempted this request already. At that time, it was denied, but at that time, there was a possibility of future water and sewer service going in, and also circulation patterns, 40 years ago may have been different. So today, we believe with all our research that it would not hinder the public or have any negative effects on the public if we abandoned just that portion of South Marie. So that's a summary of what we just discussed. We don't believe the traffic circulation patterns would be negatively affected. Again, the case history, things were different in 1975 than they are now. And finally, we don't believe it would contravene any applicable ordinance in the city. The applicant, as part of this approval, the city would be willing to give the applicant the entire right-of-way, and they'd have to pay the full appraised value for that as a condition of approval. The required replat and the abandonment would comply with all the CGCH zoning provisions. 4 notices were mailed out. I've provided you with the only comment in favor of the landowner to the southeast, had no objections. So staff recommendation is to approve the proposed vacation and abandonment of a 0.642 acre, 28,000 square foot segment of South Marie, public right-of-way between Bryan and Roosevelt Street, subject to 3 conditions of approval. If I have permission to read these into the record, we've made one change.
Yes,
we are
that's
not
fine.
requiring the zone change under number 4, and I'll go over that in a minute. So number 1 is to submit, obtain approval, and official recording of a subdivision replat absorbing the subject abandonment area into the abutting property, 1608 and 1610 Roosevelt, that's Talk of Texas, meeting all requirements of the land subdivision ordinance. Number 2 is remit the payment for the assessment formula outlined in the fee schedule. The total abandoned area would be, cost would be $2,625. That was prepared by our real estate division. The city, as an abutting property owner, is entitled to half of the abandoned right-of-way, but we've determined that we would dedicate the full right-of-way to the applicant as necessary. 3 is to provide the city of San Angelo with a perpetual public sidewalk and utility easement. That's for that future water line and sidewalk along the east portion of the property abutting South Bell. The city would pay the applicant $660 for use and benefit of the said easement. Number 4, the rezoning, as I was mentioning before, that property sits sort of right on the line of dual zoning. Traditionally, if you have a street that's to be abandoned, half of the zoning would be on one side, half would be on the other. Because the applicant's purchasing the entire thing, we've made a decision that the zone change would not be required because all of it would be there. So the whole thing would be CGCH. That concludes staff's presentation. Any questions or comments?
Questions? Questions?
No.
Nope. There being none, do we have public comment?
Good morning, Russell with SKG. We would request that condition number 1 be removed from this. If you look back and realize what condition 1 would mean to the developer.
Would you put 1 back up?
It effectively amounts to about a $250,000 cost impact for this little land area to do this. What the city says in the relevant ordinance and policies above, it says the associated replat would allow the city to obtain the necessary street improvements of 1/2 the incremental paving width of Roosevelt Street and Bell Street, which is the city has engineers and they've funded and they're moving forward to have reconstructed anyway, and Bryan Street. So what this replat requirement would do is it's going to make the Talk of Texas people make all of these improvements out there in this area. So we would like that condition 1 to be removed from it, and we'd be happy with conditions 2 and 3. And I'd be happy to hear staff's legal recommendation or reasoning why the replat is a requirement, because I have statute that may indicate otherwise.
Go ahead, staff.
I think our position on this is that the appropriate time, well, let me step back. It's been our practice when a street is abandoned to require that the abandoned street be included in a replat with the adjacent property to incorporate it all into a new property, basically. I think, in my mind, the appropriate time to have the discussion of whether or not we should require improvements to those streets is when that replat is going through the process, rather than just say at this point, we don't have to do the replat at all. I don't know if that answered your last point.
This abandonment passes,
Uh-huh.
and they don't want to meet the condition of the replat. That's optional on their part. But then things would remain the same. They would not be, basically, they would not be taking that additional land area into their property.
If I may read from the city subdivision ordinance. Let me find the exact chapter that I'm reading. Chapter 3, under subdivision, says the term subdivision shall include re-subdivision. However, this definition shall expressly exclude the division of property in the following situations. B, division of property solely by virtue of abandoning a street or alley. That's what we're doing here today. So the city code of ordinances expressly excludes that by statute. And then you can read in the local government code, chapter 7, subtitle A, chapter 212, subchapter A, under section 212, since San Angelo is a home rule city, it says a municipality need not require platting for every division of land otherwise within the scope of this subchapter. So
I think I'll address that last one first. It said the city need not require. That doesn't say that we cannot require. And if we're trying to find the section right now, but do you have the section number for that?
The first one.
First one. Chapter 3.
In chapter 3, it's right past the definitions. Under subdivision, it's a definition under subdivision.
Dealing with two, are we dealing with two current versions of the?
And mine may be some old stuff. Mine goes back to.
There is that provision in, that talks about not issuing a building permit. That basically has some exceptions to issuing a building permit where a plat's required. I think the short answer is, I think Russell's correct, that there is no obligation to replat this property under the subdivision ordinance. But again, our practice has been always to require that as a condition of the abandonment, which the city council does have the authority to do. Again, from what I just heard, there's nothing that says we can't make that a condition and a requirement.
Just that says you don't have to.
Right.
Correct.
In order to issue a building permit for the site, we can go ahead and issue a building permit even if a remnant of that lot that the permit's gonna apply to is part of an abandoned alley. That's all that that section talks about. Because the way that the subdivision ordinance is written is, when can you give a building permit? It's all tied to the building permit. So what we're recommending is that because this is a right-of-way abandonment, we can make the requirement that they have to replat this property into the original lot because it's a separate process. It's not, they're not asking for the building permit at this point. They're asking to abandon a right-of-way. And so this section that Mr. Gully is referencing, both in the definition and in the subdivision ordinance, refers to a building permit.
So you have the authority to waive this requirement. There's nothing in the subdivision ordinance that requires it. There's nothing in state law that requires the replat to happen. We're suggesting for good land records and other reasons that doing a replat is the most appropriate way to incorporate an abandoned piece of right-of-way back into the subject tract. But that's at your discretion, and ultimately this is one of the cases that goes to city council for final decision, so it'll ultimately be theirs. But you have the authority to recommend it either way.
Okay.
So your concern, Russell, is the requirements of the land subdivision ordinance if it gets replatted. Is that correct?
This approval can only be effective if we go through a replat. And so a replat being brought before you will have the conditions of street improvements because those streets are substandard. And so that's gonna trigger over a $200,000 cost impact for this abandonment. It makes it effectively not worth it at all for, we'll just leave it as it is and use it. So, you know, kind of this is all coming about. The city is needing this land for the perpetual public sidewalk and utility easement. So we kind of go walking together. We both need something.
Yep.
City needs something, we need something. You know, $2,625 on our end and $660 on the city's end. Let's do the deal. But then boom, this big $200,000 potential issue throws up out there, and it's really not at all in our client's interest to pursue it under that. So
Let me just clarify that the purchase of the easement for the city's purposes is really independent. Now, it's going at the same time. That can happen and is moving forward. The Bell Street project is moving forward. Whether or not they need to abandon this right-of-way, that's for the private development purposes. So I don't want you to walk away thinking that this is in any way necessary for that piece. Those are really two separate things that just happen to be going at the same time.
If I can make one clarification. Any conversation that is related to the plat, to the replat, can be had when that plat comes in. So if at that time, when they have to satisfy the requirement for the replat, if you decide at that time that the street improvements are not necessary, that's the appropriate time to have that discussion. Because there's a lot of information that we need to give you on this area that we haven't shown in this presentation. We haven't given you the amount of information that we think you need to make that decision, and we shouldn't. You can make that decision when the replat comes in, and you can certainly grant them a variance at that time, and they can move forward without any problems. At this point, we're dealing solely with the right-of-way. We're dealing solely with, and I'm sorry for using this nomenclature, but to clean up the property. We don't want to have remnant pieces that aren't platted correctly. We want to have a clean development, so moving forward, we have an area that looks more cohesive as they're moving forward with their permitting process. That's the only thing that we're dealing with today, a right-of-way abandonment. When the replat comes in, you can make that decision when they come in, and we'll be able to give you the information that you need to make that decision at that time.
And also, at that time, if he comes in and asks for a variance, and you think that we should deny it, and we approve it, it can go right straight on to city council. So it's no guarantee that he's going to get a variance from us.
Right.
And basically, the same thing goes for this. If we strike one, it's still going to city council, correct?
It's still going to go to city council.
Yeah, for their final, okay.
All right. Do you have any other questions for Russell?
No.
You have anything? Okay. All right. Any other questions? Oh, Lance.
Lance Overstreet from Engineering Services. I am familiar with what the city's proposal is on the Bell Street, and it is my understanding that we are not looking at a significant widening of Bell Street, that the city is planning on reconstructing it as is with the addition of a sidewalk. And so I don't know, although there could always be the potential if a replat comes up that those things, the street improvements are a part of the project that's proceeding through currently. And in the past, we have not made other individuals that are platting put forth pavement compensation typically for that street improvement if it was planned in the currently ongoing process. Now, we have had some that have offered to pay for sidewalks and other things in lieu of some of those street improvements. We've made some of those considerations. But in this particular instance, the Bell Street project for this portion of it has actually bid out already. It has not been accepted, but the other two portions of Bell Street are all going on within the next couple of months. And so I wouldn't anticipate that the engineering department we would probably support a variance from those improvements on this particular piece of plat, knowing that those funds are already there and available and what's going on. So,
Thank you, sir.
That just addresses Bell Street, though. He's still got two other streets that he may have to widen.
Or pave.
Yeah.
All right. Do you have any other questions? Do I have a motion? Do I have other questions?
I'll make a motion to approve it, to strike the first condition.
Sammy made the motion. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Mark seconded it. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All
Aye.
opposed?
Oh,
You were
I'm in
aye?
favor. Yeah, I'm in
Okay,
favor.
any- All right, so 6-0. All right, director's report, if I'm reading correctly. Thank you.
Only thing I wanted to mention was the ordinance amendments that you all considered at your last meeting went to city council. All of them except one were approved on first reading. They did table the alcohol sales within 300 feet of a church. They wanted more information, so we're going to be preparing a map of churches and alcohol permits and seeing how those relate to each other. Basically, how many current places this would be affected, and just kind of looking at that side of it. Also looking at some police reports and those sorts of things. But
Thank you for bringing that to us so that we know.
I think the police report deal is going to be your shortest route. That other deal they won't need to do is
That's
unbelievable. It's going to take you an enormous amount of time.
That should never happen. The police
well,
report deal
I
is
will
easy.
say
The other
that
deal-
we have more of that information than I thought. I had sort of suggested to the city council that would be a pretty big undertaking. It looks like it's going to be easier to collect that information. We already have a pretty good layer of the churches in town. We're updating that. And I think we can get the TABC records for existing alcohol permit locations. So it actually shouldn't be that difficult of a map to
Just
create
post
for
it.
them. Sure.
Thank you. All righty, the next regular meeting of the Planning Commission is tentatively scheduled to begin at 9 a.m. on Monday, September the 18th in the council chambers. We are now to the adjournment. It is
Make a motion to adjourn.
10:40. Terry made the motion.
I'll second.
Travis seconded. All in favor, say aye.
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 All right, we're adjourned.